Have you ever heard of a Browning B26? Welcome back to the shooting channel and welcome back to this episode. And I've managed to get hold of another different, slightly rare Browning, and this specific Browning is what you call the B26. Going back a little bit on the history, in the 1970s, Japanese gun makers, especially Maruku, were making inroads in the US market, and they wanted to bring to market and beat the B25 range, which was made in Liège by John Moses Browning, and they wanted to try and beat him. And they basically tried to do it with this. They took a machine-made gun that was made in the Maruku factory, and they finished it off in the Browning factory, by hand. And they did little quirky things. This specific gun is actually an old trap gun, and whoever owned this before has actually taken it down. They've taken the top off of it to convert it into a sporter. Now, that's a shame, because if it was in the original condition, it would be worth a lot more money. But I wanted to show you, because they did little quirky things like taking the fore end off. They pushed the lever like that and it came off there. So if you look, it's a very different way of taking the fore end off and having the lever. So normally you would have the lever here or here, as some Brownings. But this was just a little unique thing that they did on the B26s. So the B25 was a very, very expensive gun to make. So they brought out the B26, which was a cheaper gun to make, to try and compete and get into the US market. This particular gun was made by FN, but it had Browning / Maruku parts imported to FN to make the gun. So it had the cheaper components, but it was put together in the FN factory. Some 10,000 of these were produced in the 1970s, but they never quite worked. They weren't making any money out of these, and this is where the partnership between Browning and Maruku formed to then bring out what is now 525, the 425, the 325. So this was the starting of what we now see today as the 525 range. They made the B26s, they made some in sporters, they made some skeet guns, and they made some trap guns. The sporters generally were a little bit lighter, and the trap guns, like this specific one, was quite heavy. What a lot of people did buy these, and they did exactly what this did. They made it into a sporter because they liked the weight of the gun, and it does handle really, really well. It's 32 inch. It does handle extremely well. Now it's been slimmed down a little bit. And then the B26 was also, in 1983, they started to bring out the B27, which was like the next model up from this. And then they all closed it and got rid of it, and then converted everything to the Maruku factory because they were costing too much money. And then the FN factory was just the B25s, and then later on came B15s. The born of this in the US, before that we had in Europe, we had the 525 range, and then the Satori came out of this. And the Satori action, it was built in the Maruku factory. It had the same type of engraving as what the B26 and the B27 did. It's a very plain engraving, very plain wood, but it was the equivalent of our grade 1. We did have a few Satoris that came over the pond into Europe and the UK, but generally the Satori model was a US model that brought out. And you can still buy, comment below, any of you US people have seen a new Satori. I think you can still buy them in the US new now. So now, if you pick one of these, particularly B26, B27 models up, you can pick them up at sort of anything from sort of £300 to £800, so under £1,000. But you just have to be, I would personally, again, if I was you, if I'd be very, very careful with buying these from a gun shop, I would go to your local shooting school and ask an expert about these, because again, a lot of, like this particular one has been altered. So I wouldn't buy one of these unless you know who you're buying it from. Which is why there's quite a lot of them on the market. So if you go onto Gun Trader, there's quite a lot of them on the market. So sort of £300, £400, £500, because they've been mucked about with. Maybe £600, but that is why a lot of people have tried to sort of bend rules, because they were really good guns, and they are deep down. I know they've got bits and pieces from Maruku, but they are deep down a Browning. Again, if you look for the back, this has got the traditional trap recoil pad. If you look at this, it looks very similar to an MK38 trap pad, because basically it is. The pistol grip on the actual gun itself is a very small pistol grip there, because when they were building these, I think generally people had smaller hands, so they didn't have the big pistol grips that the nowadays of the MK38 has. Non-detachable trigger, so you can't move the trigger at all. Very plain black engraving, just literally it's got the oval there, a little bit of the engraving on each corner, and the same thing on this side, the oval in the middle engraving there. Plain underneath, the Browning buck on the trigger guard, 32-inch barrels. Again, like I said, to take the fore end off, it's got, if you look in there, it's got a roller that does it, which again it was reinvented in the wheel, so it tried to be different to what the B25s were, the original B25s John Moses Brownings was. So it looks good, it looks fashionable. Whether it actually worked, whether any of them broke, comment below. Did you have problems with the new catch that takes the fore end off? This particular one is fixed choke. I know a lot of them did come fixed choke. A lot of people, like I said with the stocks, a lot of people did have them T choked as well, but I don't really see the point of this, because I do feel this is quite nose heavy because it's 32-inch, but generally I do feel it might be cheap, it might be what it is, but it does handle really well. They've got a wide trap MK38 rib on them. So if you look at this particular gun, the safety catch, again, from Maruku design, it has got a lot of features from the Maruku range of guns. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to shoot a few with it, and then we're going to go through there. Pull. 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 So my first thing I would say with it is trigger pulls are quite heavy. The balance of the gun feels good, but it just feels like they've cheapened, in a way, cut the price to get that price down when they were building it, to cut that price down. And they've basically got what they wanted to do. They've got a cheap gun. So, has anyone seen the B26? There you have it. I'd love to see. Again, this is the sort of thing, if there's any of you Browning fans out there, collectors, this is the sort of thing that you could have in your collection. A B26 or B27 Browning. Comment below, has anyone seen one of these? Would anyone like one of these? Let's comment below. Let's see if we can get one of your collectors and find a home for this gun.